Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Why haven't I been invited to On the View?
Hey, baby.
Hello.
Good to see you. This book is amazing, but before we get to that, 91?
No, 92.
92. So, what's it like?
Well, it isn't that, I was telling a few people earlier, it isn't that different from 88 and 89. The big difference is when I get up and cross the room, I get applause. The big difference is I don't have to do anything to be wise.
Right.
I don't have to say a friggin' word to be the wisest person around. Ever since I turned that, they changed, not me.
Right. Still sexy?
What do you think, gang?
I think so.
Well, where the mind goeth, go I.
I love it. I love it.
And lust is a part of it. I used to be ashamed of lusting.
Why?
I used to think there was something wrong, and then I realized, what a gift. It goes with being a human being. It's wonderful.
And I would assume in 92 years you've seen and marked really all of the some big changes in the world. Airplanes in the sky, gay folks getting, no. I mean, you haven't read the book yet, you'll see. It was, Norman talks in the book about being a young man when Lindbergh made his flight and that planes were not that common in the sky.
No, I was a boy, and it was very rare to see a plane in the sky, and when we did, Lindbergh had just some years before crossed the Atlantic to Paris, and we would run down the street, Lindy, Lindy! Every plane seemed to be Lindy to us. That was all that we had to identify. But it's hard to believe there was no refrigeration. We had an ice box. We lived on the 3rd floor, once on the 4th floor, walk up. And the ice truck used to come down the street and my mother had a sign in the window, ice, this big. Iceman knew to bring up how they did it, I don't know.
Because they were huge chunks, right?
Huh?
They're big old chunks of ice.
Yes, giant, 200 pounds of ice up 3 flights of stairs. It was amazing. I don't know if I thought of it as amazing then.
Right.
But we all chased after the ice truck to get a little chip of ice.
Because it wasn't something you could open the refrigerator and get.
Right.
It's crazy. I mean, I remember the milkman bringing bottles of milk, and thinking it was strange to buy something in a carton. But I want to talk to you really about your youth. I want to talk to you about your dad, because that's a remarkable story. And ask you a couple of questions of whether that is part of what made you decide to be the man you became. Tell me a little about your dad.
My dad, it's hard to talk about him because the words that would describe him are awful. And the love I feel for him is enormous. He was, my favorite word for him is rascal. But he stole, he lied, he cheated. He went to prison when I was 9 years old for 3 years because he was trying to sell some fake bonds. Even as I say that, I think to myself, maybe he didn't know they were fake. Maybe he was taken in by the men my mother said to him, I don't like those men, Herman. I don't like those. And he said, stifle! That's where Stifle came from for Archie. You know, I think I wished, on the one hand, to have his zest and lust for life. On the other hand, to escape, be as far away from who he turned out to be in terms of his relationship to me and others he dealt with poorly.
And it's interesting you say that, because even knowing all of that, you still give him the benefit of the doubt in your heart. Because he's your dad. You know, maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't know. And you know what? Maybe he didn't. Who can
And maybe
say?
he didn't.
Maybe he didn't.
I will never know.
That's right.
He did, on the one hand, he did me no favors. On the other hand, he may have done me the greatest favor in the world.
What do you mean by that?
He went to prison for 3 years. One never knew when the sheriff was coming to the door. Sheriffs came to the door in those years. I don't know, I wasn't privy to the discussions that took place. I don't know what they were talking about, but they were sheriffs, and they were in the corner, and he was near arrest each time. And at the same time, I loved the man.
Yeah.
I loved the man. He called himself HK. His name is Herman, and the K stood, of course, for King. And he insisted he'd been born with that name, but I don't know what time in my life I found a birth certificate, and he was not Herman King Lear. But he had a brother. I've got to wait for your question.
No, please. No.
I care too much about
No. The thing about this conversation is, when you tell these stories about your life, it's a wonderful thread. And I think that they're happy that I'm letting you talk, because really this is about you.
Well, I have to say that I sit here wanting to know so much more about you. So you will promise me sometime.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure
I'll tell you anything you want to know. Yeah.
I can ask the question. Okay.
So your uncle.
So he had he had 3 brothers, and one of them was for a beer company. He was the sports Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. He was he was Eli King Lear.
Right.
And he was the first basketball announcer on radio.
Yeah.
The very first. He was a big celebrity. And he stole. I mean, he held up at gunpoint, but not with a real gun, with some toy gun. As a matter of fact, when he went to prison the last time, this guy, I had gotten out of the Army. I was a press agent in New York. And my job was to get in earlier than everybody else, the kid in the office, to read the papers. And there were 8 of them, 8 daily papers at the time, to see if any of our clients had made the papers, had made the columns. And I picked up the New York Daily Mirror, and it said, "Toy gun bandit nabbed in Philly." And it was my Uncle Eli. And he got out of prison some years later by dying. Now,
yes.
You were interested in another uncle.
Yes, I am very interested in
about
this
that
uncle. He had a very Asholian uncle who one night, in the middle of the night, Norman had gotten up to go to the bathroom, and he was doing what he was supposed to be doing and trying to hit the middle of the ball when his uncle came in and slammed the door, slammed the door and said, "Your peeing woke me up." And proceeded to teach him how to pee quietly. Now, only Norman can tell you the rest of this because I can't remember exactly how it goes. But please.
But I tell a story in the book, and I told that story years later when Ed Simmons and I were a writing team before we got involved with television and so forth. We were writing for nightclub comedians. And we wrote this story for a very famous nightclub comedian at the time called Joe E. Lewis. And the story ended with Uncle Ed and Joey Lewis repeated this, screaming at the top of his voice, "I'm going to teach you the lesson you will never forget as long as you live. This is the lesson that's known by men from every age throughout history. And you're going to learn it now. Water sprayed on water makes a sound that all can hear.
But water spritzed on porcelain
falls silent to the ear."
I love that. I love that.
Can you imagine? I got to do this with Whoopi Goldberg. Even this.
Well, I'm so glad you said that because the title is so wonderful. I'd love you to talk a little bit about it, and I'd love you to talk about what your son-in-law said to you about not being cremated.
Well, a lot of years ago, we sold our company and took down a bunch of money. And then my partner, he became the king of Latino television with Univision. I should have never parted with them. And I went off to start something called Act 3, and I was blowing it left, right, and center. And falling in love again, being divorced, falling in love again, getting married again, and all of this was occupying me, and I was a lousy businessman. I reached a place where I was going to learn from my former partner and another group what I had in this world after these major investments and the failure of a lot of things and so forth. Anyway, it was to take place on a day that my son-in-law knew about. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, on that day at the Beverly Hills Hotel, I learned that things were terrible. I mean, things were terrible. We might have to sell the house in Los Angeles, move, we have a place in Vermont, we'd have to move to Vermont. All of this was going on. And my son-in-law called in the evening, knowing that this meeting had taken place, and asked me what I learned. And I told him what I just told you. And he said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "I'm feeling like shit. Are you kidding?" But something, I guess I said, something inside of me, there's a whisper in my head, or somehow I put it, that even this I get to experience. And the next morning, he wakes me up getting out of the shower, and he's on the phone. "John, what's happening? Let me ask you, let me ask something of you. I heard you say once that you'd be cremated, and I want you to promise we can bury you." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because someday I want to take your grandsons, my sons, to a stone which reads, 'Even this I get to experience.'" So how could I not? I knew it took a long time to write the book, but I knew from the beginning that had to be the title.
And what does it mean to you? Even this I get to experience. Because it always sounds like you're surprised that you've had this life.
It means that when I turned 80, my family and People for the American Way gave me a big party at a hotel, and when I was saying thanks, I was the last one to speak, and I was thanking everybody for everything, and I said, I've got to tell you a little secret, that I've been thinking about the taste of coffee tomorrow morning. And this evening is over, and I'm already on to next. And then I thought, those two words may be the least considered as important in the English language, but they're terribly important. When something is finished, it's gone, it's done, it's over. And then comes next. And maybe if there were a hammock in the middle, that's what all the philosophers would call living in the moment, in that hammock between over and next. So I think about that when I think about, what did you ask me?
I forgot.
There you go.
Yeah,
it happens at your age too.
Oh yeah, and I didn't even do anything to make it happen. It just goes now. We were talking about the title of the book.
Yeah.
Because it is such a. It's almost like I can't believe I got here. Are you shocked to be 92?
I'm shocked to be 92. Shocked. Yeah, in a sense. I mean, that it could cause this much conversation is shocking. But I don't know. I think every second of it matters so much, and I think people don't understand how much they matter in the great scheme of things. And my sister, who is 3 years younger than I, but has been sitting in the same chair for some years now, with a big smile on her face, knowing nobody. And I have a few friends in this condition too. It's a wonder that we are all in the state of grace we find ourselves in, all of you at this moment, the two of us at this moment. But in terms of mattering, my sister, when I told her, well, write your councilman or your mayor, whatever your complaint is, and she said, well, you know, I'm Claire Lear, I'm not Norman Lear, meaning I was going to carry more weight.
Right.
I called her back a couple of days later, and I think about this now all the time. And I said, look, if you consider that this is a planet among, they say, billions, in a universe of which they also tell us there are billions, can you get your fingers close enough to measure the difference between how much any two of us matter in the great scheme of things? And I think there's something wonderful about understanding that. So that's inherent in this. Even this I get to experience, which I can feel after, forgive me, after a good dump. Even
Yeah, I might say that next time. Even this I get to experience. I like that. I want to ask you, because you have such an interesting thought process about politics and what you should do as an American and how you should be concentrated in your country. Did you have that as a kid? Did you know always that that civic pride was really important?
When I was a kid, and perhaps when you were a kid too, civics was a course in mid school. You didn't have to wait till high school.
Right.
I mean, civics. I think, and preceding, I don't know World War I, but World War II, we were in love with our country. I have no doubt that we love our country today, but we were in love with the ideas that gave birth to this democracy, all men created equal. Now, we don't run as fast, we're not as tall as each other, but under the law, we are the same, we are equal. And all the other blessings of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it was easier to, we all believe that today, but it was easier to feel it to your toes, or I wish I had a better way of expressing, to own it, to own that feeling. And that's, I think, why when World War II came along, we were there. I mean, as one, the Rosies, the Riveters,
Right.
the boys, the girls, the men, the women, of color, of no color, we were there. And we won the war. We were decent and sensible and thinking of the future sufficiently to invent the Marshall Plan. We helped Europe to get back on its feet. We were terrific. But 5 years later, we were not entitled to think of us as the chosen. We began to take ourselves too seriously, and almost literally believe we were like, God's chosen.
Right.
And we were struggling, and we are today struggling even more than I can remember, just to be the America that we tell ourselves we are.
Right.
I'm quite certain I've rambled.
You did not. You made a point. They got it. We're cool. And it brings me to a question I've actually always wanted to ask you. Do you think you could today do any of the shows that you created? Could you put Maude on today? Could you put All in the Family? Could you do the Jeffersons today? Can those shows, is there a place for those shows today? Do we need them? And what got you going? I have a million questions, so I'll just leave you with the 6 I just asked. Sorry.
Well, the showrunners I know, and of course I know a number, who are currently involved, tell me that a lot of what we did couldn't be done today. Subject matter couldn't be done today.
Does that shock you?
It shocks the hell out of me, but it doesn't surprise me. Because we look ourselves in the mirror in all parts of our culture, and we don't see ourselves honestly. And we are a nation of consumers. We were far more a nation of citizens once. I think of the media as being playing a great part in that problem, because there is so little context. You get the news in bumper stickers and arguments and headlines and the context. And we are a nation, a democracy built on an informed citizenry. And I don't see how leadership everywhere is helping us understand who we are, what our problems are, realistically.
Right. Well, one could say that became the job of entertainment, because leadership couldn't figure out who they were, and so a show like All in the Family comes along and sort of snaps people back into the present and say, oh, that's my uncle, that's my aunt, that's my father, that's my mother, that's me, Tell me a little bit about Archie Bunker.
What would you like to know about Archie?
I would like to know.
My father used to call me the laziest white kid he ever met. I would scream at him, "Why are you putting down a race of people to call me lazy? That's not what I'm doing, and you're the dumbest white kid I ever met." So it
you're
started
Michael.
there. Huh?
Basically, you're Michael.
And I'm Michael.
Yes.
Basically, I'm Michael and Maude.
Ah.
You know, Maude had a lot on her mind. I learned this in the last months of working on the book, and think I'm right about it. But, you know, I'm not an intellectual. I don't understand intellectually a lot of what I talk about. That is my reality. A lot of what I express comes from the way I feel about you, about people, about our place, about life, about so forth. Not because I know. That was Maude. You know, she was designed to be the opposite of Archie.
Right.
He knew nothing about what, I mean, he just had these feelings and these bumper sticker ways and he was afraid of progress.
Right.
That's what made him a bigot. He was afraid of other people usurping what he thought he had.
Right.
And so I'm not unlike Maude.
Right.
I don't, you know, I think of Rob Reiner.
Yes.
Rob Reiner, a second son to me. He and his dad, Carl, would say that. We were both fathers to him. I've known him since he was a kid. And the hesitation is my mind goes to 19 stories along
Right,
the way.
right.
But Rob knows what the hell he's talking about when he talks about politically. When he talks about why he believes something, he'll give you chapter and verse.
Right.
I'm not there. I just will express the best way I can how certain I feel about it.
Right.
And I admire, like, you know, the way he masters what he's talking
Right.
about.
Right. Okay, hold on a second. Really answer the phone. Answer the phone. It's okay. It could be an emergency, I don't know, but answer it. Or turn it off. On the, what is that called? The vibrate. Thank you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, or I didn't hear it.
Everything else has fallen, but the ears have become really sharp. So was Carroll O'Connor, was he reluctant to play Archie?
No. He knew a cab driver that who I never knew, and he had that cab driver in mind the first time he read for me.
Right.
And he read like he remembered that driver, and he nailed it immediately.
Was he your first choice?
He was my first and only choice, but along the way, I was in New York and I had auditioned a number of actors for the role, and working with a magnificent, talented woman, Marianne Doherty, about whom they did a documentary within the last couple of years. She was fabulous. And she introduced me to some wonderful actors. But I wondered, I was going back to LA to see some actors she recommended in LA.
Right.
And then I wondered if Mickey Rooney could play the role. So I knew his agent, whose name was Red Doff, and I called Red. And I said, I have a television idea for Mickey Rooney. And he said, oh, Mickey's in the office. Why don't you tell him? He's right here next to my desk. And I said, no, it's an odd idea. The role he'll play, I'd like to explain in person. I'd like to, you know. And Red said, Rooney evidently heard, well, not evidently, he heard this. and wanted the phone. He said, no, he wants the phone. He wants to hear it now. So Mickey Rooney gets on the phone. He referred to himself in the third person. I didn't know him at all. I'd never met the man. He said, Norm, what do you got for the Mick? And I said, I'm coming out there next week. Can't we meet? I'd love to tell you about this in person. It's an odd character. No. You can do anything you can tell a Mick in person, you can tell him on the phone. So I said, well, he's a bigot. He's going to say spick and spade and heeb and nigger, and the words are going to come. He said, Norm, they're going to kill you in the streets. They are going to shoot you dead. You want to do a show with the Mick? Listen to this. Vietnam vet, short, blind, large dog. He never read the script, and I didn't know anything about large dogs.
There you go. But now, what about Edith? Where did she come from? I liked her, but I felt... No, I didn't feel sorry for her. I kept wondering why she didn't know there might be a better man out there for her. And then my mom said, because you got the person you got. That's how it works. You get the person you get, and you either make it work or it doesn't. And I was like, oh, okay. Clearly, I never listened. I got married 3 times, but I didn't know.
I did that too.
Oh, yes? And I missed you. How does that possible? But where did Edith, is she based in someone?
Edith is based on a question. What would Jesus do?
I like that.
What would you do? And so when one of my favorite shows, when Archie was driving a cab, and a woman, a passenger in his car, had a heart problem. He gave her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And she showed up at his door to thank him when she found out who the cab driver was. And only Edith was there. Archie was upstairs. And Edith and the camera, we learned that he was a transvestite, transgender. Archie had given mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to a man.
Yes.
And then he comes down and reacts and so forth. And she just loves him for who the human being is. And there's no doubt about it. And I mean, that's the question we asked ourselves constantly. And when we wanted to examine the question of Edith's faith, what might cause her to lose it, we had seen this character in between a time or two, and we did an episode where he is killed off camera for who he is.
Yeah.
And she loses faith in any God that can see that happen.
Yeah.
Then we had the problem. We knew we had a great script there. Then we had the problem: how does she regain it?
Yeah.
How does she regain her faith? And we spent weeks on that. I remember calling people from the philosophy department at UCLA.
Right.
And a couple came in and we talked, and how does she regain her faith in an episode? Because we were, after all, a television show. And somebody along the way asked, well, when she loses her faith, what happens to Archie? And I realized in a flash, Archie goes to pieces because he depended on her for the strength she had that emanated from that faith.
Right.
And that was we were able to write that second episode, and we did the two.
Right.
So that's the longest way to answer your question.
No, but it's,
who was Edith?
Because she's so, to this day, I don't think we've seen another character like that who encompassed all the good, all the altruism, but could really be pissy when she was mad. You know, she was very clear that she let him be who he was.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And she did get mad.
Yes, she did.
She got more informed and angrier
Yeah.
and so forth with the feminist movement
Yeah.
over the years.
It was kind of remarkable. And then there's race. I mean, so here's a show, and suddenly there are black people on TV again. Now, you know, we show up every couple of years. You know, we're up for a resurgence about right now, I think. But suddenly, there were discussions being had about race and people and humanity. And really that sort of caused by you. And then to see a show come out of All in the Family to become the Jeffersons. And that character, I mean, where did George come from? I love him.
George, I knew that George had to be as stronger than Archie. And it mattered to me that he was littler. Spunkier, littler. And couldn't find the actor before we really wanted to show the family.
Right.
So I can't remember the name of the actor from San Francisco. He was terrific. And we introduced him as an uncle to Michael, who everybody knew from next door, and to Louise, until I remembered having seen, or Marion Doherty remembered and reminded me of having seen Sherman Hemsley in a show called Pearlie. In a musical called Pearlie, and when that occurred, because I knew I had seen the performance, oh my God, was he the guy? And that's one of the delights of remembering a performance and saying, oh no, that's the ideal of this.
Right.
And so we brought Sherman Hemsley. We waited until he was finished with something he was doing and brought Sherman Hemsley out, shorter than Archie, spunkier, and fiercer in his own way. And we had George Jefferson.
Right. And then an interracial couple. You just trying to piss people off. I mean,
well, it was, I don't know, wasn't it time? I mean, we saw interracial couples. It wasn't like they didn't exist. And talk about holding your interest. If you can see something that you know exists, and how interesting was that to show that couple. And Roxy Roker,
fabulous,
played. I've lost her name, but the character's name. But Roxy Roker. When I cast her, I told her she had the role. I said to her, I hadn't cast the husband yet.
Right.
And I said to her, Roxy, these people are going to be seriously married. I mean, they're going to kiss, and they're not going to kiss lightly. They'll kiss if they kiss on the mouth. And if we ever see them in their bedroom, there'll be a single bed. I mean, they're going to be very real. I have to tell you this because this hasn't happened on television, and I can't be sure what could happen or how you could be, your own people could think of you, but you should know this. And she said, let me answer your question this way. She dug into her purse and she took out a photograph of her and her husband, and he was Kravitz.
Yeah, Lenny Kravitz's mom. Roxy Roker.
He was a white Jew.
Yeah. Yeah. So now,
Tell me about that.
what, being a white Jew?
No, being a black Jew.
It freaks people out constantly. And the only question people want to say is, so really, are you? And I go, am I what? Because I want people to ask the question. Say, yeah, I'm a lot of stuff, but I'm also that. And it doesn't change your life. You know, it is what it is. Like we say in life, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
And now,
But now why?
Why what?
Why a Jew? Why did you go to that?
It's just somebody.
Wasn't it tough enough?
Well, you would think. You would think. And see, this is what people don't understand. You know, you can't choose who you are. You are who you are. So, you know, get over it. It's okay.
I'm reminded of what they used to say about the big joke about Sammy Davis.
Yes.
The poor fellow, he was black, he was Jewish, he had one eye, and he lived in the valley.
Yeah. I followed those footsteps, yeah. But now, so Jerry Falwell, tell me about, why did he say that you were the single biggest menace to the American family?
Because I became scared of the proliferation of TV evangelicals in the late 70s and 80. Falwell, Robertson, Swaggart, and so forth. Once I heard Swaggart ask his TV audience to pray for, like, just the removal of a Supreme Court justice. And that was serious stuff. And I didn't seek to start an organization.
Right.
I wouldn't know how to do that. But I did think of a PSA, a public service announcement, and I produced it. It was, you know, took a half a day, and it had a factory worker on a piece of heavy equipment. The camera pushed in on him as he talked about his wife and kids, and he disagreeing politically about things. But now here come these ministers on radio and television telling them they're good Christians or bad Christians, depending on those political points of view.
Right.
Now, he happened to be a good Christian in their eyes because he agreed with them. But his wife and kids didn't, and he said, I know my wife's a better Christian than I am. My kids are damn good too. Wound up saying, there's got to be something wrong when anybody tells you you are a good or a bad Christian, depending on your political point of view. That's not the American way. And I sent it to Father Hesburgh at Notre Dame. I had met him. I knew him slightly. And then I flew to Notre Dame to talk with him about it.
Right.
And he said something to me, an expression I could never, ever forget. He said, most mainline church leaders would agree with what the man is saying in this commercial. But in addition to that, what you might not know is that we have a serious problem with the way the evangelicals, torture Scripture. Well, the words torture Scripture are indelible. And he gave me the names of some other mainline church leaders, and I flew around the country seeing them. And in somebody's office, they said, this should be institutionalized. And it was.
Why did you care so much? What is it in you that makes you care so much that you will gather other people together to have one voice to say, there's something really wrong and we're looking at it? Why do you care?
My God, it's such a good, deep question. And maybe, and I haven't thought this before, but maybe it was the father I had. He, with all his zest and everything else, he wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to do the things he did to people. I had a great friend who had just graduated, we were kids, he just graduated from college, he was, or accountancy school, and he was going to be an accountant. He just opened an office, and And my father, I learned years later, when I was living in California, broke and trying, and Herman, this was my friend's name too, he wrote me years later that my father had borrowed $400 from him because he was desperate for money. He needed $400. He borrowed it and didn't pay it back when he said he was going to pay it back. And then, I don't know, it was very difficult for my friend Herman. And then finally my father, he dunned my father. He needed the money. And finally my father said, I'm going to bring you the money. You don't have to do that, Herman. Just send it to me. No, I'm going to bring you the money because I want to tell you something. So he came to see my friend, and he said, I want you to learn this. When you get a check, you don't know how many checks that person wrote that day and whether they all could be covered. So you go to the bank and cash that check right away. Because, he had sent, I forgot this in the story, he had sent my friend a check and it bounced. Now we brought him the man, and gave him this lesson. And, I mean, it was terribly unfair. Terribly unfair. And maybe it comes from that, a desire to be fair. And that's what I love about the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment and the guarantees of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's fair.
Yeah. Why do you think it took us so long to get it together? I mean, the document was there, it says all the right stuff, but it took us a while as a nation to get our behinds in gear.
Well, I'm not sure we're there yet. I mean, that's the fact. I mean, this president has disappointed me in many ways, and I don't think he's been treated fairly. I don't think the deepest feelings in this country are treating him fairly. And racism exists. I mean, it just does. So we've got a long way to go. I'm proud of how far we've come. But when you see what's happened with the gay and lesbian situation in just a few years, wham, how fair things have become, relatively fair things have become. We need more of that kick-ass fairness. Thank you.
Tell me about your mom.
My mom. I called her.
I like the story.
I called her when a good friend who had just become president of the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, we're long.
No, you're
Of Television Arts and Sciences, called me to tell me that they had just started. They would be starting a Television Hall of Fame. And I was going to be among the first inductees, along with the man who who started CBS, the man who started NBC, the greatest writer in television, Patty Chayefsky, Edward R. Murrow, the best of the newsmen, Lucille Ball, and Milton Berle, and me. And I told my, thank you. That's what you say. This is what my mother said. Listen, if that's what they want to do, who am I to say?
So, somebody wants to know about your hat. It says, how did the hat start? It's so iconic.
The hat started a great many years ago. I was married to Frances Lear, and I was writing, 15 hours, 18 hours a day, and I was picking my hit. I had a scar on my head because I was just scratching my head. She walked in one day and she tossed a hat on it, and my head, that is, and said, don't take this on. And I kept it on. I fell in love with the hat. And this is a replica of it I had made in France a great many years ago. I don't know where there are hat makers today. There used to be a lot of,
Yeah.
speaking of things that were when I was a kid.
Right.
There were stores that sold hats. I mean, chains of stores that sold fedoras.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you a quick hat story.
Please.
I started something called the Business Enterprise Awards to honor companies that were good for 360 degrees of their constituents. And I had a great board, and I wanted Sam Walton. I wanted to invite him on the board, and I called him, and I got him on the phone. And I interested him sufficiently to say, look, this is, if you want to talk to me about this, it's got to be in person. And he was going to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. God, it's so unusual. This is this place my father was going and got into trouble in Oklahoma, Tulsa. Anyway, I was flying east in a private plane, and I stopped in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was on the ground when he flew in a Piper Cub himself, flying his own plane. And Sam Walton and I spent what was supposed to be 15, 20 minutes. It turned out to be a couple of hours. And we got fascinated in each other's story and fathers. And he told me about his father, and I told him about my father. And some weeks later, and he decided he wanted no part of what I was thinking politically. But it was a great time with him. And weeks later, his office called and said, I had Ben, our son Ben, was 5, 6 years old then. And he said, the office called and said, what is his hat size? Mr. Walton wants to make a 10-gallon hat for him. Because my father was supposed to come back from Oklahoma with a 10-gallon hat. And then they called weeks after that and said, there is no hat at that size. Mr. Walton's going to have one made. And the hat that was made for Ben at that age sits on a shelf today. Gift of Sam Walton.
Gotta love it. Yeah. So, Steve Manning has a question. He wants your opinion on being politically correct.
My opinion on being politically correct? I don't like it. What to say?
Okay. What are you watching on TV these days?
Ooh, that's a good question. Because I want to commend to you a show I think is fabulous. I've only seen 2 copies of it. I haven't talked to that many people who know about it. It's called Transparent. You know this one?
Yes. Yes.
And Jeffrey Tambor is playing
Brilliant. Brilliant.
a guy in his late 50s with 3 grown kids who knew from the age of 5 that he was a girl, should have been born a female. And now, with these grown kids, he's coming out. And this actor
Jeffrey is
walks a line
magnificent.
of heartbreak and hilarity, which I find heartbreaking. And it's one of the greatest performances I've ever seen.
Yeah, I have to agree. You can get it on Amazon on demand because it's an Amazon show. And Jeffrey he's dressed as a woman for pretty much all of it. And he's spectacular. So if you get an opportunity, check it out.
Great.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your family, because I'm fascinated by your grandma.
By my booby.
Lovely.
This was a woman, round, short, made the best gefilte fish in the history of gefilte fish. And she said very little. But somehow I knew as a boy, I lived with them for 1 year, or maybe a little more, of the 3 years my dad was away. And so I was 10, 11, and 11. But I knew she had a great sense of humor, just because I could see when she smiled, when she knew. I love the expression foolishness of the human condition. She got it. And to the extent that I got it at that age, I got it from her. Because when my grandfather went nuts, and he did that often, if you put a hat on the table, why his superstition included a hat on the table. I never put a hat on the table, by the way. I did it for a moment in my hotel room last night. And if I was in the habit of crossing myself, I would have crossed myself. That's how ingrained it is. You don't put a hat on the table. But she understood, and her smile meant everything to me. And I write in the book, and I guess you're referring to that, when she was dying, or I didn't know she was dying, she was in a home. And I came to visit her. She'd be gone some weeks later, but I came to visit her. And she was sitting in a chair, and she was tied to that chair. And she had defecated some hours maybe before, and they hadn't cleaned her. And she was just, it was a wretched scene. And I don't remember whether her eyes are open or closed, but when I said to her, "Booby, it's Norman from California," her eyes flickered open, and she says, "Norman from California." And I said something to the effect of, "How are you?" All she had to say was, "How am I?" Oh my God. How am I?
And what was it she always said that, not by now?
No, she said well, she said a couple of things. If you walked in to say the Dodgers just won the pennant, and she didn't know anything about baseball or the Dodgers, she'd simply ask, "Good for the Jews." And I think the expression, if you said it had nothing to do with the Jews, or it had to do with baseball, she'd say, she didn't understand at all, she'd say, "Go no." That's the expression.
I love it.
Go no. I thought about calling the book Go No.
Well, in a way you did. It's
In a
kind
way
of
I
good.
did.
It's kind of wonderful. So Steve has a question for you, Norman. Was the Maude spinoff conceived before B. Arthur appeared in All in the Family?
No, the reason it was a spinoff was because she was on All in the Family. That appearance in All in the Family, I wanted to have Archie hit as hard as he could be hit. Mm-hmm. And having grown up in the family I grew up in, I knew that only an old relative can kill like I wanted to see Archie killed.
Right.
So this was a cousin of Edith's. Maude was a cousin of Edith's from childhood, and they were best friends. And she disliked Archie intensely, didn't want Edith to marry. That was their history. So we brought B. Arthur to play that role. And the two of them together in that episode where, and she beat the hell out of Archie. Before that show went off the air in New York, Fred Silverman from CBS was on the telephone asking me if, do you know that there's a show in that woman? And of course we had that in the mind from the beginning. And that's how Maude came about.
How did B. Arthur come about?
I saw her in a show many years before. There was a fellow by the name of Jack Rollins. There is, I believe. Jack Rollins was Woody Allen's manager. Right. I adored him. And he introduced me to the theater in a sense. We used to go to the oddest off-Broadway places and see actors. And all of the Rue McClanahan's came out of that, the experience of seeing theater with him. And one of the pieces was a show called, I've just lost the name of the show, but I saw B. Arthur standing alone on the stage at a stoplight at night, at a light at night, singing a song called Garbage. This guy treated her like garbage. And every time she hit the word, the audience roared. It was hilarious. And would you believe that after a lifetime of wishing to find that song, somebody within the last 3 or 4 weeks, I don't know where they got it, a recording of that song, B. Arthur singing Garbage.
Wow. I'm going to look for it now.
I'll get it for you.
Please do, because who doesn't want to sing He Treated Me Like Garbage? No, that's not right. Okay, so somebody wants to know, what's the one thing you know?
The one thing I know at this moment is that I've had the best fucking time I could have. That's the truth. That's the truth.
Well, so I just want to point out a couple of things, because I just find it amazing, and I still can, right? Yes, am I still good? I'm not in trouble. Okay. Because, sometimes I go on and I'm not paying attention because they're behind me. You talk about a multitude of lives that you've had. Do you think that is something we are all having and not realizing that that's, in fact, what's happening? Because you say your last child was born 45 years after your first child?
My wife, Lynn, and I have 3 children. 2 of them are twins. They're 19 years old. They're in college in the East. And my oldest daughter is, she'll never forgive me for saying it, is 68.
Wow. So that's the whole life of family. Then there's the lives that you've had with your...
Well, there was, I believe, there was a life before my father went away. Right. We were a family. And then there was the life I led alone with this relative, that relative, and my grandparents. And then there was a life I fell in love with when I lived with my grandparents with Miss Nevins in whatever grade I was in at 9 or 10 or 11. I loved Miss Nevins, and she had a dimple that caused me to fall in love with Kirk Douglas many years later. I'll never forget Miss Nevins. And that was and I lived with my grandparents, and that was a life. And then you get into, you know, high school, and you have a life in the debating club. You have a life in the, if you're a football player, which I wish to be and couldn't. But these are, I think, all lives within lives, and then lives end on end.
Right.
Certainly, my military service was a life I didn't expect at all. And, you know, there's a life with each child, a life with each. I think we all live lives end on end and lives within lives.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it, life? I mean, I kind of like it.
It's so much better than the alternative. As we know. I mean, we don't. It may be better later. I'm married to a woman who believes that.
That it might be better later?
That it might be better later. I can't get there. I would love to get there.
Right.
I'm rethinking that. Because I'm quite satisfied not to know. You know?
Yeah.
The time will come, I'll know, or I won't be capable of knowing.
Right. Or you'll know and you won't care.
Or I know and I won't
You know.
care.
And are you...
But I love that she feels it.
Right.
And while I don't aspire to feel it, because I don't think it can happen for me, I admire that she truly believes there's more coming.
Right.
That, and the way she will put it is that a God that can give us this much of everything
Right.
is capable of giving us more later.
Huh. All right.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Why haven't I been invited to On the View?
Because some people have no taste. It would never have occurred to me that you'd want to come on that show.
I'm selling a book.
This is true, and you will be on this show before the next week. How's that? Oh, maybe. Yeah. No, because, you know, generally when people ask me those questions, I have nothing to do with who gets on and, oh, hello. Of who gets on and off that show. But periodically, I can assert myself and say, with those words no one likes to hear, this is what I fucking need. And sometimes I can get it up. So if I can get it up, will you come?
Absolutely.
I mean that I don't think that was the right way to put it, but so listen. You may have lots of questions for Norman that I'm not going to get to because our time is up. So let me suggest this. 2 things. They have the book here. But if you are someone who wants to hear it so that you're in it with him, get the audiobook. It's pretty remarkable because he reads it. And you are right there with him. And I love a book. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love a hard copy. But man, that audiobook is, I love it. And I love you, and I'm so glad I got to come and play with you.
I love you too.
Shall we take our bow?